Welcome back to another episode of The Hit. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. Today I was delighted to be joined by Claire Griffiths, Chief Executive of Cobalt Housing. We talk about Claire studying in Liverpool to become a town planner, her journey through housing into becoming Chief Exec of Cobalt 12 months ago. We talk about the changes that have happened in that time, their new corporate plan, which is due to be launched shortly, and how they need much needed housing within the region and a new partnership deal with Lovell. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, James. Thanks for inviting me.
No worries. I'm excited for this. As I always like to start, would you mind just giving us a bit of an introduction to yourself as you are today, role, title, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I'm Chief Executive of Cobalt Housing. In 1991, I left University of Liverpool. And I think, well, I always say I was the sector's first ever graduate trainee, which I have no idea whether it's true or not. But it certainly felt like it. I certainly didn't come across any other graduate trainees working for housing associations at that time. So I was given this opportunity to come and learn how to do housing association development, which I thought meant I was going off building, fantastic new developments. And it didn't. I was putting in stair lifts and level access showers for my first couple of years for housing cooperatives in the Dingle part of Liverpool mainly. But you know what? It was a brilliant time, and I just loved my job from day one. And I knew from other friends who graduated that they weren't all loving their jobs, so I knew straight away what a real privilege and a lucky person I was. And that's carried on largely to date. Really, I've always loved working in social housing. I did though spend a couple of years working in overseas development. I worked for Homeless International, which is now called Real, which is a charity that supports house building and infrastructure projects in developing countries. So I spent 3 years literally traveling all over the world, meeting amazing community-based groups who were trying to develop house building, water projects for street dwellers in Mumbai, for illegal slum settlements in South Africa and all over the place. And it really was a life-changing opportunity. And I've always been really lucky to be given that sort of opportunity. So I try and give out opportunity where I can, because I always remember how fortunate I was to be given these opportunities. Early on in my career, I was promoted way out of my capability and experience. People took risks and it mostly paid off.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Again, that's something that I try to replicate.
Amazing. I mean, I'm interested in that, traveling around the world. What did that trip teach you, I suppose? Because I suppose different cultures, different landscapes, all that sort of stuff. But what was some of the key learns on that trip, would you say, that you came away with?
It sounds cliche, but it was mostly around the genuine strength of community capacity building. So when things are for pavement dwellers in places like Mumbai and Calcutta, they have no welfare system or safety nets. There are no government funds to support them in any particular way, or there weren't at that time. So they genuinely have to build that capacity and lobby. And it takes years and years and years. But when they succeed in that, the impact and the genuine sustainability of that community capacity is far greater, I think, than when it is dropped down from the top. And I think it's almost strength through adversity, which is my positive way. Sometimes when funds aren't available or external funding, actually it makes you work harder, try harder for it.
Yeah, exactly.
It was mainly about the genuine strength of community groups and what they can achieve, but also the time that takes and the sort of support that they may need.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I suppose from your perspective, why housing? Because you're obviously really passionate about it. But what was the big driver, if you go back to those years? Like, what was the big driver to get into the sector in the first place? Because it sounds like you're very passionate about housing, generally speaking. So, what was the driver, would you say, back then?
Well, I was a town planner by trade, so I had
Okay,
an interest in urban design and the built environment.
fine.
So yeah, that had always been my interest from studying really and seeing the opportunity to go into housing development. I decided early on I didn't want to be a planner.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a kind of opportunity for me that seemed perfect.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose, like, been in the sector for some time now, what's been some of the key evolutions in that time, would you say? What's been some of the major changes in that 20, 30-year period that you've thought, it's mad to look back now, but actually there's been so much change, hasn't there?
There has, it's phenomenal. And when I first started 30 years ago, we'd started wearing suits in the
Okay.
early 90s.
Yeah.
But it was, there was still it was still dominated by people that were committed to a social purpose and wanting to change things and do good. And I think that's still the case. I mean, the sector is absolutely full of people absolutely committed to their
Absolutely.
social purpose, but it's just much more professionalised. There's a much wider, the array of professions working in the sector is huge now. And we wear suits, but and that's more normal. But it still feels quite niche.
Yeah.
When I started, it was a small sector and it felt niche. Now it's a massive sector, but it still feels niche. And I wonder whether therein lies part of the thing that we need to think about, trying to improve our message and our reach. Because I saw a statistic yesterday that next year the sector will borrow 51 billion from private markets just next year.
Wow.
Which in terms of its reach, its impact, is massive. So yeah, that is the big change. I think it's the scale and the financing of the operations and its reach and impact. But I still think we've got a job to do to make that known more and to be treated more as serious partners by government in all its forms.
Yeah, no, I agree. And coming from a planning background or certain studies anyway and development background, like you'll understand the intricacies of the challenge that we face at the moment. And I want to come on to that. But obviously 12 months at the helm at Cobalt in terms of a chief executive, what's your reflections of that 12 months? I'm interested to understand what's been your reflection of that time and that period.
I still can't quite believe I've just been given this unique opportunity, although it's finally sinking in now. I think, being a CEO is it's challenging. It's fast paced. You need energy and enthusiasm. There's not a lot of time to show that you haven't got that. For me, I'm quite an introvert, so there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not going to pretend to be an extrovert, but you have to manage that. In a certain way. I think, and I'm not afraid to say it, what I thought I knew in the first 3 months and then at the next 6 months, I'm actually now thinking I'm not quite sure I got that right, or I'm not sure that is what we need to do. So, and I'm a person in a hurry, I'm very impatient, and I knew I'd have to temper that. So I think, it's just being prepared to just reflect, perhaps change, and take some time to make sure that because we're making big changes, we're making big investments. So you've just got to reflect, you've got to listen, you've got to build rapport, consensus, and that will take time. And for an impatient person like me, that's probably my biggest reflection. But absolutely, it's just been amazing, and as I say, I just pinch myself to be given this opportunity.
Amazing. I've got a few questions for that, if you don't mind, the follow-ups. Firstly, did you always know you wanted to be a chief executive, or was that always the...
I never wanted to be a chief executive. Fine. In fact, I stated that I didn't want to be a chief executive.
Yeah, fine. Okay.
And then there was something about this job, and it was the same when I saw my graduate trainee job at CDS Housing. I don't know how I came across it, but I saw it. I thought, that is my job. That is my job.
Yeah.
I didn't know it. I wasn't planning for it. But it's come along, and actually, I'd never been so certain about anything in my life, really. So I'm not a superstitious person or believer in fate, but something drove me, and I committed, probably 6 months of my life to making sure that I got the job.
Amazing.
That's what it takes, to be honest. If you want to go for this sort of role, they don't fall out of the sky and they're not handed to you. Well, maybe they are, but this one certainly wasn't. So I absolutely focused all my energies and efforts on making sure that I was successful, which fortunately I was.
So you mentioned something about being introverted, and I love that. And I think there's much more introverted leaders than there ever has been previously, because I think that there's a real skill in being able to reflect and not be extroverted in leadership sometimes. But how has that held you back? Because I speak to a lot of people that go, not sure I'd be good at that, public speaking and these things, and I don't want to put myself in the limelight. But how have you managed that, and what's been some of the things that you've worked on to make yourself like confident in certain situations and stuff?
I think it's, some of the leadership training I've had in the past and some of those techniques, and it feels quite forced and constrained. But you have to go into your working day. I am the chief executive here, and people are looking to you for assurance, for answers, or even just for a friendly chat or a friendly smile. How much the impact of that. I would never have been someone that thought I had any impact on anybody, and didn't particularly want any. But you have, I've signed up for this, so I have to be cognizant of that and put my efforts into that. So I think, I suppose where extroverts, if they were listening to feedback, it might be, don't put so much effort into talking about yourself or shouting or whatever, about balancing that. So I think, a good extrovert leader will need to know when to be quiet.
Yeah, of course.
A good introvert leader will need to know when they need to project and put more effort into that outward-facing role.
Yeah, it's really good feedback, that. And I think I speak to a lot of people, and I don't want to get confused between introvert and confidence, because that's not the case. Yeah. But you mentioned something then, and I was thinking, there's so many talented people at that sub-exec level that I speak to and our team speak to, and it's honestly a confidence thing of being brave and saying, I really want this. And like you've just said, it doesn't just fall from the sky. And actually, there's a bit of effort required and a bit of learning and a bit of development needed to step up to that next level. What's been some of the key things in that chief executive role that you weren't expecting, or you have expected, that have been slightly different than what you thought they'd be? Because I'm interested to understand what has been the step up and what have been some of the challenges in that first 12 months for you to get your head around.
I think it's, most people coming into a chief exec role will come from one area of expertise.
Exactly.
So, mine was development, asset management, that sort of thing. Others, it might be finance or customer, front-facing services. And you suddenly have to be, you have to oversee everything, and you're not an expert on everything. So you're relying on information. So, the things that when you've got to senior level in an exec role, it's because of your expertise in that field, and suddenly it's just completely useless almost. Yeah. Because yes, I could focus on that, but that's not what a chief exec does. A chief exec's dealing with a whole range of things every single day.
Yeah.
Most of which are not related to your area of expertise, or your experience, or what you thought you should be doing or you want to be doing. Yeah. So I think it's suddenly thrust into that. I found the biggest shock and the biggest learning curve. And as being ready for anything, you simply never know what's going to happen on any day, or what sort of issue you might have to deal with, or what sort of amazing thing and humbling thing. I mean, I immediately attended some community events in our neighbourhoods, and I was just sort of really humbled and the strength of that community, and I wasn't expecting that. Our communities that we work in are really stigmatised, and I was just blown away. So just being open to all these really good things, but also some really challenging things that come across.
Yeah, and how have you found that from? I always think about this actually. Like, if you've come from asset management and development, there's so many different areas, like you said, finance, IT, all the other stuff. How have you found building teams? Is that important, would you say, in a chief exec role, to make sure you put the right people, the right personalities, all of those things around you at the right times? I
think it's building that senior team that can work together effectively and collaboratively is almost one of the most important things. And I think, going back to the sorts of people, the one thing that lockdown and everything that went with that taught me is about genuinely reflecting and embracing that diversity, and that's in its broadest sense. So we all got to know each other a bit better, didn't we? And each other's homes and stresses and strains, and who was, how people were coping. So for me, it's about that diversity of leadership and being, more tolerant, more accepting, more forgiving, but being clear about expectations, and it's that sort of balance that I want to see. So having most of my senior team are brand new to me, so getting to know them, getting to know people's strengths and weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and trying to steer us through that as a team. Yeah, it's quite challenging. I'll be honest with you, James, but no one's really trained in that sort of thing.
I think no.
Yeah, so I just try and approach it with honesty and approachfulness, and what I've learned from some of my chief executives I've worked for is that actually that kindness and human face can go a long way. So I try my best at that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good feedback about pandemic, because I agree. I think we became more human in the pandemic with the whole. Even if you weren't a human leader then, like now, it's everyone wants to understand people's mental health. There's more check-ins, there's more understanding of someone's personal circumstances and situations, and how that might impact their work. And I think that has made us wholly a better sector, to be honest, for loads of different stuff. You talked about studying in Merseyside, and now you work in Merseyside. I'm interested to see how you think the housing landscape has changed from a more regional basis. I'm always interested, especially in Liverpool, to understand in Merseyside. There's a definite need for new housing, as you know, but also what's been the change in the landscape in the last sort of 6, 12 months, 2, 3 years, would you say?
I mean, it's been a difficult environment. Cobalt, like a lot of Merseyside-based associations, have just carried on doing what we're doing. In some ways, the difficult political landscape has given us perhaps an opportunity to refocus on getting our core purpose, core services right. But now, the need for regeneration is just so acute. You look at North Liverpool in particular, and to have to try and, level up or whatever within the existing funding restrictions, priorities, is we are just tinkering around the edges, James. But the issues haven't really changed. For a city like Liverpool, it's still about the inner cities and the outer estates. There's lots of money been spent, there's lots of stuff gone on, but some of these core issues around poverty and inequality of opportunity and aspiration haven't really budged much.
No.
And I think part of that is because communities in North Liverpool have had to bed in for the last 45 years to survive, and that is embedded now. So trying to address the lasting impacts of it on people's incomes, on people's health, on people's aspirations, in some ways is more challenging now than it was 20 years ago. So I think we've got have a long, hard conversation about how we respond to that. And what I look at how we're going to respond at Cobalt, and it's actually, we just Cobalt. So, our community base is Croxteth, Norris Green and Fazakerley. So it's a part of North Liverpool. We are going to be investing over £300 million of our own money in the next 10 years, just in these communities. And that's through our planned investment and our growth programmes.
Wow.
So we must be able, as a region and as partners, to bring these investments together to form a better whole outcomes for the city. And that is starting at a city region level. We are going to be combining the investments to try and to draw out green jobs, training opportunities, but think about it in a longer term way. So if we can get proper regeneration funding that's needed for some of to regenerate the areas, but link that to longer term social value outcomes, and let's work with the communities to define what they are and what mean. That there has to be a real opportunity here, but that is going to take another, that's 10-20 year job.
Yeah, of course. And what, when you inherited the stock, I've got two questions. One was, Has there ever been a more difficult time to be a chief exec of a housing association? Because you've got the cost of living crisis, net zero carbon, development targets, we need to build more houses, dampen, there's so many. I mean, honestly, there's no way physically to do everything. How do you prioritise in your current role with the budget that you've got of where to invest the money that you have? And second to that, I suppose, how important is it that we find a way of doing all those things? Because especially like you say in Liverpool and some of the areas you've mentioned, we need to be giving people the right home so it gives them the right platform to develop their lives and move on and progress. But if we just start with the first thing, how do you manage those priorities? Because it must be incredibly difficult.
Well, I think my job is not easy, but it's possibly easier than others because we are just here.
Yeah.
So we don't have aspirations for world domination. We are just here to invest in these communities. We can see them, touch them.
Yeah.
So the job is simple. We're going to invest in these neighbourhoods. We're going to build new homes. We're going to make them safe. We're going to make them zero carbon. We invest massively in community. I think we're one of the biggest investors in non-housing in the sector for our size. So we want to make sure that investment, which is huge for us, is going to the right partners. We've got really strong partners, and is delivering some measurable outcomes. So in that respect, my job is one of the simpler ones. We don't have a complicated group structure. We've got no borrowings at the moment. We're financially very strong. So we start from a great platform, which is part of the reason I pinch myself at being given this opportunity. But also, the weight of that responsibility, I am saying, and we will do it differently, I'm saying we'll make a difference and that we will stand up to be measured and counted and held accountable to that.
Yeah.
That's how strongly I believe that we can do things better and differently.
Love that. And just for the listeners' benefit, I already know this, but just give us a helicopter overview of Cobalt today in terms of how tenants, etc., just so we can get a feel for the size and scale.
Yeah, so we are just under 6,000 units.
Okay.
And we were one of the first LSVTs in Liverpool, 2003. We're 20 years old now. We are a little bit famous for being one of the few associations to demerge. We demerged from what is now Onwards Housing 5 years ago to be standalone because we want to be just a community-based housing association. And that's, we've spent the last few years focusing on setting ourselves up independently. We're now ready to start that reinvestment programme again. We did it 20 years ago at transfer. We've got a massive growth programme, over 1,000 new units over the coming years with the funds in place to do that. We're quite fortunate that we don't have any particular fire safety or issues like that around our homes. Mm-hmm. They are all mostly 2 and 3 bedroom houses built around the garden suburb type principles after the war. Having said that, we have hardly any specialist housing for older people or supported housing or homelessness. So again, we are absolutely keen to diversify our offer, and we need to build skills and capacity to do that. We want to diversify tenure. We want to bring in homes for sale, low-cost home ownership. To really build confidence and aspiration in our neighbourhoods. We've got to invest in green space as well. So, although I don't want to be smug about our financial strength and lack of some of the other challenges that we have, I'm not confident about the job to do.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. And I know you just mentioned that you've had a new leadership team and stuff, but, in the first year or so, you mentioned that you've done a lot of change and you're driving change, but what are you trying to set out from a culture perspective, and what are you trying to set out from an identities perspective that you want to be known for and that you want the organisation to be?
It's fascinating, and to be honest, the cult. Everyone talks about the organisation's culture, and then when you actually try and identify what it is, it becomes quite difficult, really. And we are an organisation that our partners love, is what I would say, and that's because we genuinely want to do the right thing. And I think we really want to keep hold of that. We want to be seen as a contemporary place to come and work. We're going to be investing in our headquarters. as well as making it a more collaborative, modern workspace. We're going to convert the whole of the ground floor to be a community hub.
Nice.
We will just throw the doors open to our partners for a whole range of uses, whether it be health or singing or knitting or police partners. The whole of the ground floor will be given over to that. So we're committed. We're not going anywhere. We are just genuinely community-based housing association, and I'm really keen to explore that identity, because what I'm seeing in our neighbourhoods, as well as some really challenging issues around poverty and health, domestic violence, is the strength of some of the women's groups here is just incredible. There's a real growing thing. People are growing food everywhere. They're just doing it. There's loads of stuff going on with young people. The schools are doing really well. So it's about crafting that identity for this part of North Liverpool. In place of some of the more negative stigmatisation that still hangs over us a bit.
Yeah, of course. And how have you tried to instill that in your team? So not just your leadership teams, but your staff I presume that's involved in your recruitment process to make sure people have that community mindset and they do want to deliver those great services and customer at heart and all that. But how have you instilled that into your teams and your leadership teams?
Well, it's we've got some really committed staff. Some of our staff have been here since transfer, so they know our customers, they know our properties, and in terms of building new operating models and developing that new customer service offer, we've already got in place, because we haven't changed over that period what a lot of people got rid of 10, 15 years ago, in terms of frontline housing staff that know every single inch of their patches. We really value that, that local understanding and that connection. I think if we can craft that with a better digital offer, a slicker repairs, all those sorts of things, making sure we're getting the basics right, but understanding our patches and our properties and our customers, which are my neighbourhood teams do. That for me would do it.
Yeah, of course.
So that's but it's easier said than done. The whole issues around data and IT and the digital stuff. We're not as advanced as some, but we've got the opportunity to catch up. So I'm confident that in 2 to 3 years' time, we will have a very different customer offer. But you don't come to work for Cobalt if you're not interested in the very best for these communities. So anyone that wasn't into that would be weeded out pretty.
Of course. I'd hope so. And look, I love the people first approach sometimes, I think we sometimes talk about digital too loosely, in terms of everything needs to be digital. And I don't know about you, but for me, certainly, like if I go on a website and someone tries to fill out a bot form or a robot, I speak to some of the communities that I'm part of, and they wouldn't want to do that. They want a person, they want a human, they want some interaction. So I think it's really important. I actually don't think it's a bad thing that you're behind on the digital stuff at all. And obviously there's been some real political and social changes, certainly during your tenure. What's been the sort of impact or effect that's probably had on North Liverpool and the housing market, would you say?
I mean, I think it's going back to that. I don't think the political upheaval and the instability has had too much of an effect, to be honest. Okay. I think until, as I say, people in North Liverpool will get on with it, and they'll be doing what they're doing. I think that what we do so desperately need is some injection of regeneration funding, and I really hope the city region itself hasn't got the devolution deals that Manchester and the Midlands.
Of course.
And the city region mayor himself will say that we're a few years off that. So I just hope that won't detract from the region still being able to access what I'm confident will come. I think some wider regional funding is coming. I really do. We want to be ready for it on an estate level, at Cobalt, which we absolutely are. But also, the bigger asks in terms of that big infrastructure funding that Liverpool needs. I just really hope that political upheaval won't stand in our way. And I don't think it will, to be honest. I don't think it will.
No, hopefully not. And everyone needs it. I think we're all in need of some regeneration funding. So I get that. And I noticed that you've done some new partnership stuff. I saw A £12 million deal with Lovell. Talk us through that. I'm interested to understand what that is. You've mentioned partners a few times, but what's that going to be, and how important of a role is that affordable housing needed in North Liverpool specifically?
Well, it's the deal with Lovells is the second phase of really us trying to knit together regen when there is no regen funding. So we've demolished some parts of an old bad burn estate with some really good new homes on. The next phase, Lovells are coming in. We're going to do housing for shared ownership, intermediate tenures as well, which is a big step up for that area. But this area links onto the East Lancs Road to massive employment uses, to much bigger potential regeneration sites. So it's the second part of what we think will probably be a 10-year regen. We'll link that with our own funding into our Croxteth estates, investing in the open space, net zero. It really could be the beginning of a new era for Croxteth. So it's very exciting, and it's taken a while to get there. But I think with Lovells we've got a great partnership.
Love that. And when I speak to people and other housing associations in Liverpool, like, the need for new affordable housing is so important. I mean, like, we've got to keep the development wheels turning, even though the funding and the finances might not be there, because once you turn it off, it's very difficult to turn it back on, isn't it, in some cases?
It is. And on our estates we have an average of 150 applicants for every property. These are family homes, close to employment links, close to Aintree Hospital. We're already talking to the hospital about how we can support some of their staff, in finding accommodation and developing partnerships that way as well. So the need is absolutely.
And I saw that you just released, I think, was it last year or certainly recently, you released a new corporate plan. Just talk us a little bit about that and some of the key strategic aims and stuff that you wanted in that plan.
Yeah, it's literally drying. The print is drying.
Oh, is it? All right, fine.
No, we've been heads down the last 6 months on this, really, and it's feeling like it's really coming together. So, like a lot of people in the sector, we're going back to basics. So we've just got 4 key priorities, which are dead simple, but there's a huge amount sitting behind them. The first is to provide excellent customer services. The second is to invest in homes, both existing and new. So that's 300 million. The third is to help our communities to thrive. So again, it's just about honing and recrafting our community offer with key partners mainly. And the fourth is around positive people. So, we've got to attract and retain talent. We've got to develop that talent, invest in people, a new collaborative working space, but also be clear on that performance management approach and what we expect from people. The 4 areas of the corporate plan are easy to remember, but sitting behind it is detailed sort of 5-year plan and massive investment in IT and digital, as well as our own properties. So it feels like a great starting point, but also slightly daunting.
Yeah, I bet. Sounds like a lot to get on with. And in terms of you just mentioned it, but the one thing and the reason that I started this podcast is I'm trying to make housing a career of choice. I think that's important. And I do think it's becoming more akin to the next generation of talent. But what's your opinion around how we can change the narrative so it is a career of choice within our sector? Because you love it. I can see the pride in you. But how do we make that more appealing to the next generation and more people to want to come and join this amazing sector?
Well, it's interesting, James, because we were talking about this. We're about to go out to recruit for, to establish our own in-house IT team. Mm-hmm. We'd outsourced it prior.
Okay.
So where do you start with that? We know it's one of the.
I don't know.
The ideas. So we've brought in a new director of IT and transformation, Sequoia Chapman from the Christian School, which is absolutely brilliant. So she's getting stuck into the universities. We'll hold whole days with new graduates. We'll try and market and recruit in a different way. We'll absolutely, go back to investing in apprenticeships, trainees, placements, keep it coming, keep the talent coming. We'll try and give opportunity internally, even if people might not think they're ready for it, because that's what happened to me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
You know, and then I think on some of the other roles, it's the need for professionalisation, as it's called, will perhaps again, you know, it's almost like we're going back in time, but perhaps that's not such a bad thing. We just do it differently. We do it more digitally. We start speaking younger people's language. We absolutely focus our efforts on schools and universities. We make more noise about, you know, these are well-paid jobs, secure, potentially more secure than other jobs. We have good conditions, as you said. You know, that could well be more of a, you know, we can be agile, family friendly. I think it's about making more, you know, getting those, instead of saying, do you want a career in housing, you know, perhaps some of the salary ranges or some of the other benefits, because people wouldn't necessarily associate that with the sector. But as you said, you know, highlighting the work we do on sustainability, on social values, on community-based activities. It needs a refresh. You know, we can't just all keep churning out the same adverts for the same people.
And it's the channels as well that I've noticed. I mean, I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and I don't imagine, like when I was younger, that she'll be using Milk Crown to find her job. So I think we're probably going to find TikTok or something. I don't know what it'll end up being, but it won't be the traditional means that I used. And maybe we've got to try and find omni-channels to take our messaging to that younger generation. Because at the moment, we're still stuck sometimes in the dark ages around how we advertise roles, and the world's moved on a little bit. So it's an interesting feedback. And on the flip of that, how do we develop the next generation of leaders? And secondly, what would be your advice for budding chief executives out there? And what would you give them as advice to the future leaders of the sector of how to tackle that and how to approach getting a role as a chief exec?
I think there's got to be something around broadening out diversity to its absolute broadest sense, and you know, around neurodiversity, around different ways of working, and I think if you want to be, going by what I said earlier, you know, you've got to put your heart and soul into it. You've got to be up for, you know, winning the hearts and minds and communication, and remembering to do that while at the same time, you know, your biggest pressures will feel like they're perhaps around finance and governance. So having to balance that softer skills with the harder skills, and I think put that across that you can do both. You know, you'll do some things better than others, but you'll have to put and develop those skills of being able to multitask, of being able to you know, understand complex business plans and risk management, but also be a human being. You know, not being afraid to be authentic, or being judged by that. You know, it's that sort of wider acceptance. I mean, I'm probably not the best person to give advice, because I'm guilty of not thinking things through before I do them. but coming out lucky the other side, and I suppose. Yeah, what I've always had confidence. I've always had that people that I can confide in, people that will give me advice that aren't official coaches or mentors, but, you know, go to those people, take the advice, use your networks, make it be known. You know, have those open career discussions, and it's what I encourage. You know, in Cobalt is let's, you know, be open about where we want to be. So if one of my directors says to me, "I want to be a chief exec in 2 years' time," you know, it's not like, whoa. It's, you know, well, how do we help you to do that, and whilst also making best use of you in the business. So, you know, there's a whole networks of people that I've worked with or worked for me, you know, almost like a family, that I think it's really strong. It's a real strength to be able to build on that.
Yeah, and I think we're in one of the best sectors there is for allowing people to move on. I know that sounds awful, but we want to retain that talent within the housing sector. 100%. But actually, if you work in the private sector, telling your boss that you might want to be a chief exec one day would be career suicide. In our world, it's absolutely the right thing, because we will always allow people to have that pathway into those roles. And I think that's a really good benefit of our sector. As we come to a close here, just wanted to quickly ask, kind of, and you've probably mentioned it already, but what are you excited about in your next journey as a chief executive? And what are some of the really exciting things and some of the blue sky thinking things that you'd love to see Cobalt do in the next 3 to 5 years?
It's like I said, it's that potential. Just to plan that investment, our activities, what services we offer, to have the time and space and opportunity of, we've got to do quick things, we need to make some quick improvements in some things, but to be able to plan and see that 5 to 10 year horizon. Again, a lot of businesses can't do that. And take the time to plan and get it right. But also, we won't get it all right. And some of it won't make perhaps the positive difference it needs to, but needs to be done anyway. But just to be able to genuinely sit down, scope, have those open conversations, listen to customers, listen to partners, listen to stakeholders, and build that vision, that identity, just seems just such an amazing a luxury and an opportunity. So it's keeping, I keep my eye on that bigger picture, on that longer goal. And that would be, for my 12 months as CEO, that is one of the best piece of advice I can give to myself and anyone else, is just keep your eye on the longer goal, because there will be hiccups and challenges along the way, and at times you'll feel like you're doing things that I don't think a chief executive should be doing this, but you need to do them anyway. But you've got to keep your head up, keep out there. That's the way I motivate myself, is to just go out and go out in the neighbourhoods, meet some of our customers, meet some of our community partners, get to know some of my colleagues better who are working in the front line, and feel better about everything then.
Amazing. What a lovely way to finish. Honestly, I loved having you on the podcast, and I honestly have never met someone that is so proud to lead an organisation. I think it bursts out of you. So I really, really look forward to seeing what Cobalt do in the next 3 or 4 years, and I can't wait to track the journey. But I really appreciate all of the insights you've given us today, and I look forward to tracking the journey.
Thanks so much, James. It's been a real pleasure.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.